I owe it to our audience to at least suffer so they don't have to. Remember, Rush would always say, I watch the Sunday programs, you don't have to listen or watch. I'll watch them for you and report back on Monday. Kind of the same theme. Yeah.
All right. That's a good point. Great show tonight, Sean.
All right. Have a great show.
All right.
Thanks,
Good
Laura.
to see you. Good evening from Washington. I am Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. What a fantastic show we have for you tonight. What other type of show would we have? Can you imagine if I said we had a really lame show, but you have to watch? It's going to be a great show. Ann Coulter and the angle on the watershed moment in Hollywood, the worst rated Oscars in history. So do you think the political smack talk from celebrities had anything to do with that? No. Plus, a reporter joins us with an exclusive new report on the Russian investigation and what the FBI has been hiding. Plus, we're going to examine the rush to take guns from people deemed a threat or unfit. Dan Bongino debates a Democrat on whether this is the first step on a very slippery slope. Also, nervous Republicans warn President Trump not to start a trade war with tariffs. But he has an even bigger warning if other countries don't stop cheating. And Dolly Parton, you are not going to want to miss this, with some advice for star celebrities, athletes who insist on getting political. And speaking of that, the humorless, out-of-touch American left. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Okay, over the weekend, CNN released, and then went apoplectic over comments President Trump made to a group of donors on a Saturday event at Mar-a-Lago. Now, Trump noted that Chinese President Xi Jinping was now going to essentially be president for life. And Trump added, I think it's great. Maybe we'll want to give that a shot someday.
China's great, and Xi is a great gentleman. He's now president for life. President for life. No, he's great. Hey, look, he was able to do that. I think it's great. Maybe we'll have to give that a shot someday.
I can't do Trump as good as Trump can do Trump. Well, look, it is obvious from the audio that this was something called, in English, a joke. It's obvious to everyone except America's resistance media, which has all but lost touch with reality.
This kind of consolidation of power is not just un-American. It's impractical. It's counterproductive. And we ought not to hold it up.
Donald Trump is praising a man's consolidation of power that has been compared repeatedly to Mao's.
Yeah, all he knows is, is it good for me and my image? Is it good for,
Does it feel good to say right now?
Does it feel good to say it right now? Yeah, I know
it's even more visceral and stupid.
Kind of
there are strains of authoritarianism going on here in the homeland. That is something that the people in the room, I think, probably were laughing nervously at. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Totally. Well, no morning jokesters there. CNN's Chris Cillizza saw something even more sinister. Under the headline, "This may be the scariest thing Donald Trump has said as president," he wrote, "Trump has demonstrated his governing theory is largely centered on taking as much as you can until someone stops you. That worldview is what makes Trump thought on Xi all the more chilling." Well, it was no more chilling than what he said on Saturday night at the Gridiron Dinner, which is a fun comedic event for the D.C. and business power players. Again, this is humor. The president jokingly referenced possible talks with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, saying, as far as the risk of dealing with the madman is concerned, that's not his problem. That's his problem, not mine. In other words, Trump's a madman, trying to make fun of himself. So you know why the left is so agitated by these jokes? Because the president is besting them at their own game. And in the process, he's kind of endearing himself to the public. I have a question. Why should the left be the only group allowed to engage in a little sarcasm, a little comedy, a little self-deprecating humor? The left does not mind at all dishing it out. But the moment the president or any conservative ribs them, or even themselves for that matter, self-deprecating, there's immediate blowback. What am I talking about here? Movie stars, sports celebrities, television actors, they shoot their mouths off on politics and public affairs all the time. It's like reflexive. They can't help themselves. And we're supposed to react as if Plato himself had come back to opine on contemporary issues. Like, oh, thank you for your commentary. It's so well informed. Look, everybody has the right to speak his or her mind, of course. And they're welcome to come on this show anytime. But just because you are a celebrity or get paid millions of dollars to play a game doesn't mean you get a free pass to offer illogical arguments, avoiding substance, and just engage in drive-by media attacks. And you don't get to do that with impunity. And if you do that, you shouldn't be taken seriously. In case you hadn't heard, I wrote a best-selling book 15 years ago called Shut Up and Sing. I went after leftists such as Barbra Streisand, the Dixie Chicks, love their music, Michael Stipe, love his music, and a bunch of other celebrities who love to opine on politics. I routinely call out these elites who feel like their celebrity in one arena gives them political authority and heightened credibility to speak on all these complex issues of the day. Last week, we at the Ingraham angle caught Barbra Streisand in a little bitty lie. She claimed to Variety that the presidential election was rigged and that she had spoken to, quote, senators from Wisconsin and Michigan, close quote. Well, no one bothered to call up the 4 senators from those 2 states, but our producers did. We called both the Wisconsin senators, who told us they did not speak to Barbra Streisand and certainly said nothing about election fraud. Oops. Now, even former NBA star Kobe Bryant, a phenomenal basketball player for the Lakers, somehow won an Academy Award at the Me Too Oscars for a small animated film he made about basketball. Well, that's kind of fun. Well, there is now an online petition with over 16,000 signatures and counting to rescind Bryant's Oscar owing to, I guess, a rape accusation in 2003 by a 19-year-old woman. They ultimately didn't bring the charges. He settled the civil case with her. The accuser refused to testify before they went to trial, and so eventually he did away with the suit by, I guess, settling the civil claim. But Kobe's was just one of the many awkward Oscar moments that were kind of far from funny and even repellent to the American public. Host Jimmy Kimmel, in his opening monologue, referenced this film, Call Me By Your Name, a Best Picture nominee. And the film was about a 24-year-old man who has intimate relations with a 17-year-old boy.
We don't make films like Call Me By Your Name for money. We make them to upset Mike Pence.
Okay, well, actually, you might not thrill the American people either, who saw few of the art house films celebrated at this tedious Tinseltown love fest last night. Jimmy Kimmel's Oscars fell to a 9-year viewership low last year in 2017. But this year, I've got to say, Jimmy, you outdid yourself. He presided over the lowest rated Oscars ever. I say nothing says happy 90th Oscar like a 20% drop in your lousy ratings from last year. 3 cheers. But let's face it, these people are fanatics, so they don't care.
Dreams are the foundation of America.
And to all the dreamers out there, we stand with you.
Marginalized people deserve to feel like they belong. Representation matters.
Who are more marginalized, by the way, in Hollywood than conservatives? How about Christian conservative? Is anyone more marginalized than someone who actually voted for Trump and works in a major film? Come on. These people are just complete phonies. Hollywood, sports figures, all these people have one job. And this is why they get paid a lot of money. And good on them if they do get paid a lot of money and they're good at it. They entertain us. But instead, as we saw last night, they give us, like, bizarre political lines or storylines or characters that most Americans can't really relate to. And then, meanwhile, Hollywood ends up attacking a lot of the values and ideas that millions upon millions of Americans hold dear. And then when they're criticized, they cry like infants being weaned, which makes sense since many of the celebrities are used to feeding off their sycophantic staff and media enablers. They're not used to criticism. Perish the thought. All of this is a big turnoff, though, to the audience. And they have a lot of options to choose from these days, don't they? And if you want to know why these celebrities are so nasty to the president and so upset when he or any conservative dares to crack a joke, well, I have an answer. For all their vitriol and all their bile directed at conservatives and the president, you know what he keeps doing? Put it in a language that everybody understands here. He keeps putting points on the board for America, the American worker. And our audience is growing, while the Oscars audience is tanking. Now that's what I call funny. And that's The Angle. Joining us now for reaction in West Palm Beach, Florida, is best-selling author Ann Coulter, and in New York, Kathy Rue, who is publisher of Catalina magazine. It is great to have two smart women on this show. All right, Kathy, have at The Angle, have at me. I'm sure you disagree with some of the things I said.
No, not a word. Not a word.
Oh, I love you anyway. You're awesome.
But it wasn't a love fest. You said it's usually a love fest. So this year it wasn't just a love fest. It was beyond the lip service. It was beyond the patting on the back. And Hollywood got real. So they were as real as what's happening outside. So for 90 years, they've left everything that's real, everything that's uncomfortable on the outside of the theater. And this year they brought it in. And if a little bit of America was uncomfortable, so be it. That's the way movements start. That's the way they continue. And that's how things change. I consider it progress. And good for Hollywood. They got real.
It's an all-time low in viewership for the Oscars.
Award shows are low.
Do we watch films and the Oscars for them to opine on politics? I mean, I'm not saying some of the really smart people out there, but I think most people just want to release from the nasty left-right, which, look, I'm sure we're part of it, but I think people want entertainment to escape some of it at least. And I think when these actors and celebrities just marinate themselves in politics, I mean, you can watch us, you can watch other networks for that. And I know you were glued to your television set last night. I have to say, I didn't watch 1 millisecond of the Oscars. I had a kid with the flu and went to bed early, but go ahead.
Fantastic. We have the perfect panel to discuss the Oscars because I didn't even know they were on and didn't watch them. However, I did have a friend from the industry calling in like every half an hour to give me the political updates, and I did look up a few videos later, so I do... I am an expert now. And one thing that was funny about it is, I mean, this was supposed to be the big Me Too Oscars, but it very quickly went off the rails. And, all these women who've been raped and pawed and had their careers destroyed, like Mira Sorvino. I mean, she's a real hero who should have been celebrated. No, that was pushed aside so we can talk about transgenders and illegals and immigrants. And intersectionality. We got intersectionality in there. And as for your opening statement, no, you're giving most celebrities, I think, really fantastic advice, and they can take it from people like us. I had an actor sort of making fun of me once, a very famous actor whom I won't name, and, sneering at me because people come up to me on the street and, say mean things to me. And I said, yeah, everybody says nice things to you. They're talking about your character. At least when people love me, it's really me they love. But, you and I, and I guess all three of us, I'm sorry, I don't know you, Kathy, but you're in politics. If you're in politics, you're going to have half the country hate you. There's nothing you can do about it. But if you're a skier, like someone I used to love, Lindsey Vonn, haha, I was so happy when she lost, or, you know, these actors and actresses, you can have the whole world love you. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, but
why do you bother leaping out and taking a political position, ticking off half of the country?
But it's admirable. They're choosing to do so, which is admirable. They're no longer just giving, like I said, the lip service. We can't criticize them anymore for just hiding behind their characters. They're showing we are intelligent. We're not directors. Look at all these roles. Look at what we can do. And they had the women stand up, and they did explain each role that women play behind the cameras that, I mean, most Americans aren't aware of. I think we're just aware of the,
Kathy, do you think most Americans care about the gender or the race or the ethnicity of the cinematographer? Don't they just care about whoever makes it and whoever's great at it? That's awesome.
The beauty of it.
Aren't we supposed to not care about gender? I'm really confused because I thought we were supposed to get away from gender, race, and sexual. Everyone's the same. Now everybody's not the same.
No,
and
that's
we have to bean count in every profession. And heaven forbid you're a white male and you're a cinematographer because you must have totally screwed someone over to get your job. I'm sorry to be harsh there, but I think if you're a white male in Hollywood, you probably have a target on your back, given the atmosphere out there, which I think sometimes doesn't give due process to people. Poor Ryan Seacrest. I mean, I don't even know Ryan Seacrest, but he was like the persona non grata last night after he was cleared, as far as I can tell, of any wrongdoing in any case. But now nobody will go up to him like he's a leper? Like, what's that all about?
But that's how movements start. I mean, the other Oscars were so 89 Oscars ago. I mean, this is the 90th. This is a new time. The next 90 years, we are going to care more about genders. We are going to care about these things. That's the whole point. This is a turning point.
Wait a second.
So we have to care. They're telling us we have to care.
We have to care. Okay, well, Gary, hold on one second, guys. I want to play one soundbite that's really, I think, really positive. Gary Oldham, who won for, of course, The Darkest Hour, playing Churchill. This is what he said when he won the award.
They just go off into all the politically correct stuff. I thought that was a lovely acceptance speech, and I'd like to contrast it with Guillermo del Toro's, who talked about how we have to have a borderless world, and I'm from Mexico, but there's no border. Well, except the important point is he didn't mention that the reason he didn't go back to Mexico for 15 years was that his father was kidnapped and held for ransom for several years until he got someone to provide $1 million. So he better hope that wall gets built. He won't go back to Mexico now, moved his whole family here. Maybe truth in advertising. And I just want to say quickly about what Catherine said. They are not showing their intelligence. They are showing they are bimbos.
All right. Both of you are smart women, very accomplished in your own right, and we really appreciate your joining us tonight. And I have a question. Could a judge take away your gun rights even if you haven't been committed of a crime? Dan Bongino here next to debate it. Mentally unfit. Well, 5 states already have these so-called red flag laws. Here's a red flag. Here is a red flag. Are these laws are unconstitutional? Well, let's debate some of And what's wrong with a so-called red flag law or initiative?
Well, Laura, I'm glad you said that. First, let's just say every reasonable person, me included, agrees that anyone who's a danger to themselves or others, a lot of these laws are already in place, by the way, should be nowhere near a firearm. Where would you get it? Also, you're already a prohibited possessor if you've been mentally adjudicated to be unfit or if you've been committed involuntarily. The problem here is, what do you do, Laura, with a guy who has, you know, say maybe obsessive-compulsive disorder? Maybe he has some kind of an irrational phobia. Maybe he has a mood disorder and he's a little depressed. But an otherwise law-abiding citizen who's done nothing wrong, what do you do with that person? Are his constitutional rights now open for debate? And one last thing on this, Laura. You know, Listen, I get it. There's a lot of emotion, as there should be, wrapped up in this horrific tragedy in Parkland. But let's be clear on this. A very small portion of people who are mentally ill become violent later on. And I think it's very unfair to a very sick portion of the population who's done nothing wrong to have their constitutional rights thrown out the window.
Let's remind everyone what President Trump said just last week on this issue, which kind of sent the whole debate into some tumult. Let's watch.
I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Chris, that must have been music to your ears. Like, take the guns first, then go to the judge later. In some ways, that sounds really good. But you can see, depending on where the authorities are, like politically, it could be. Remember, Janet Napolitano said in 2009, returning veterans could be a problem, single-issue voters could be a problem. And I know it sounds like a slippery slope argument, but you could see why the ACLU even has a problem with expanding the definition of red flag.
Well, look, I believe in due process for everybody, but I do believe we have other systems in place similar to red flags, like orders of protection, where you go into court, you have a judicial oversight of the order, and then the person can come back and challenge it within a certain period of time. And I think that might go a long way to solving the problem here with people like the shooter in Parkland, who there were warning signs, people were complaining, and if they had a process by which they could participate and take that gun away from him, that probably would have saved lives. And of course, if he wasn't, deemed by a court to warrant this, the guns being taken away, he could petition and get those guns back.
Dan,
that's what courts are for.
Dan, when you think about what California was trying to do with their red flag law, they already have a provision on the books. They were trying to expand it to include coworkers and like neighbors who could call into authorities and say, well, this seems like a little. And again, it seems like okay when you think about someone like a Nicholas Cruz. But what if a neighbor just doesn't like you? Like the leaves blew onto your side of the property and you were ticked off, like, oh, this guy seems a little unstable to me. That's where I think the ACLU and other civil libertarians have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, we've already seen this with the Obama administration's edict on Social Security recipients who, for whatever reason, they didn't have to be mentally ill, but felt like they couldn't handle their financial affairs. The Obama administration said, hey, let's put that information in NICS. And by the way, you can't defend yourself with a firearm now either. So I get it. I get it when people say, oh, it could be a slippery slope. But one thing the Obama administration and the Clintons have taught us is the slippery slope is really slippery. It's really steep, and you always wind up falling down it. I mean, who thought they would spy on innocent Americans with metadata? Oh, that happened too, by the way.
You have post-Obama stress disorder, my friend. Let me tell you something. There is a judicial review. There is a judicial review process here, right? You are not just taking the guns because somebody said something to somebody. A judge would have to sign off on this order in most of these cases. So, and I would, by the way, I would never support a red flag law that did not have a judicial review to it. So when there's a judicial review, the courts have held you are not denying due process in that situation if the person can then go back to court and challenge that decision within a reasonable period of time.
Guys,
so we have an option here to do that.
But guys, Chris and Dan, in this case, we didn't even need a red flag law. We had the FBI told that this guy was threatening to shoot up a school, and they did nothing. Okay, so we could have like 5 of these red flag laws. He still should have been prevented from getting a gun, and they still should have visited his house and then dealt with it from there. But I think the red flag, you didn't even need that in this case. The guy was a total nutbag.
The state of
should never have had a gun.
Laura, the state of Florida visited his home, knew that he had a gun, knew that he wanted to buy a gun, and did not see any need to remove any ability for him to get a gun.
The FBI had a warning in January that he wanted to blow up a school.
They had the most permissive gun laws in the country in Florida, and that's going to change now.
Chris, listen, you're a big government advocate. which this is odd. You're citing government failures as you're simultaneously a big government liberal, and you see no irony in that at all.
I'm citing a failed government of a failed governor's
literally a 911 call on tape with one of the people who took him in saying that he put the gun to the head of someone else. Nothing happens, and you want more government to fix the government that couldn't fix the problem before.
That's horrible.
Good job.
All
well
right,
done.
guys.
And that's horrible, and that's why we need the courts involved here.
All right, guys, great.
No more
great
government here.
Great segment, Dan and Chris. Love to have you back. And new details next on the bombshell connection. This is unbelievable. The Clinton Foundation and the man who triggered the entire Russian investigation. Stay there. Oh, this is fun. Republican investigators in Congress have a new and slightly troubling question for the FBI. Now, why didn't the Bureau tell them that the guy who triggered the Russia investigation actually had a multi-million-dollar connection to the Clinton Foundation? Reporter Alison Spann has been investigating Australian diplomat Alexander Downer. She now joins us to discuss her article just published in The Hill tonight. Alison, great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so now this is like a cast of characters. This is like a mystery novel. But tell us about Alexander Downer and his connection to all of this Papadopoulos character and why it's important.
So if you remember, in the summer of 2016, Alexander Downer was the one who came out with his evidence about George Papadopoulos. He said he had a drink with him in a London bar, and Papadopoulos revealed to him that he knew that Russia had some dirt on Hillary or might have some damaging emails to her. So he's the one that actually gave that information to his government. The Australian government gave it to the U.S. government, and that launched the whole Russia probe into Trump-Russia collusion. Yeah. Well, now we find out that Alexander Downer has a tie to the Clintons.
Now, what a tie. Now, he's at a bar in London. He runs into Papadopoulos. The circumstances around how he ran into him is interesting. You addressed that slightly in your piece.
Right.
But now, fast forward 2 months after he sees him in that bar, Australia brings this to the FBI. Right. Took 2 months. That's kind of interesting.
Took 2 months.
But then you find out that of Downer's connection to the Clinton Foundation is?
He secured them a grant for $25 million from the Australian government, funded by taxpayer dollars, to go towards AIDS prevention and treatment in Asia.
Oh, that's great. AIDS prevention. I mean, what could be wrong with that? So $25 million foreign money from Australia goes to the Clinton Foundation. Now, is there any question about how that money was used or whether it was fraudulently obtained?
So there was an audit that was conducted 3 years later, and it just wanted to basically go through and see what that project had achieved. Now, they did achieve some great things as far as getting those children the antiretroviral drugs that they needed and might otherwise have been given a chance to get. But there were some questions about the money in that case and whether it was handled properly. And in fact, the report goes on to say that it was so mishandled that it was actually detrimental to the project. And they were given a score of 2 out of 6 for handling the money. And
2 out of 6?
Yeah,
that's
2 out of 6. Now, the effectiveness...
That's typical Clintons, 2 out of 6. That's actually a high mark for them in handling finances or ethics. I just want to read this. This is from the Clinton Foundation audit. Some management weaknesses were noted, with human resource management, the absence of readily available and useful budget information showing exactly how funds were spent, and project monitoring. So it's not a resounding plus, but the more important thing is, why wasn't this revealed? That's a big grant. That's a connection to the opposition candidate, to Donald Trump. He happens to be in this bar. He happens to meet this Papadopoulos guy. He happens to funnel the information. And he's not a minor figure. He's a well-known liberal politician in Australia who's buddies with the Clintons.
And I think that's what a lot of members of our Congress are asking now. We talked to Jim Jordan for our story, and he was shocked when he heard this information.
So you brought it to Jordan?
We brought it to these congressional committees who
They didn't even know!
No, they didn't know. So we
Nice
actually
work.
brought this information to these congressional committees who are investigating this case. They had no idea. The FBI did not disclose this information to them. So they're shocked, and they want this to be investigated. And in fact, Jordan said that he wants a second special counsel because, as he says, that the FBI cannot investigate themselves.
This is one more example. First, you had the dossier being funded by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. That wasn't revealed to the FISA judge.
Right.
And now you have this.
Well, and there's actually 4 pieces of information they didn't reveal. The dossier was funded by the DNC and Clinton. Sidney Blumenthal, who is a close Clinton supporter, was funneling the information to Christopher Steele through the State Department. And then you had the Yahoo article that was quoted in the FISA application was written by Michael Isikoff, who got his information from Christopher Steele. And then now we have this connection between Alexander Downer and the Clintons.
Now say that backwards really fast.
I know the Russian investigation is very complicated, but we have 4 instances now. All 4 pieces of information came from people who knew, at least knew the Clintons.
Just for fun, this guy Sam Nunberg, we are totally out of time, but Sam
So I just, because it is the talk out there, again, I know it's awkward, let me just give you the questions. You can categorically answer them. No, you happy to have a drink today?
My answer is no.
Thoughts?
It was painful to watch. I don't know how I would react in a situation like that.
But he's not testifying for it. I don't know him at all. I mean, he was hired, fired. I mean, but he's not testifying. He's not talking to Mueller. I mean,
sounds like he could possibly be facing some jail time if he refuses to show up in court and doesn't provide those documents. So, just another piece of the puzzle for this.
Maybe he just has really bad halitosis or something, or he chews gin and tonic gum or something. I'm like, who could have been anything. Allison, I hate to drag you in on that mess, but I'm
not
sorry.
drunk.
That was what. Allison Span, The Hill. I'm not drunk. That is the quote of the day. I'm just kidding. Great reporting, you and Solomon.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And by the way, Allison, President Trump slaps down Republican criticism and explains he's not trying to start a trade war. He's trying to end one. Don't miss it. President Trump's not backing down. He's defending his plan to raise tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum, even as he takes heavy flack from his own party. A spokesperson for House Speaker Paul Ryan said in a statement, "We're extremely worried about the consequences of a trade war, and we're urging the White House to not advance with this plan." He didn't say it in that tone, but I did. Trump responded by telling reporters, not backing down. Joining us now with a reaction is Brian Riley. He's the director of the Free Trade Initiative at the National Taxpayers Union, and Gordon Chang, who's written extensively on foreign affairs, including trade. It's great to see both of you. I want to play, just to reset things for a moment. I want to play a flashback from just a few years ago from some of the so-called experts on what trade would do to free up and maybe improve things in China. Let's watch.
Bringing China into the WTO is a win-win decision. It will protect our prosperity, and it will promote the right kind of change in China.
And let's be frank, if China emerges as a stronger economic power, but with a more liberalized political system, that will be very, very good for the world.
I believe a country that trades with the rest of the world is a country more likely to embrace freedom.
How's that worked out for us, Brian?
Well, the thing is, Laura, this isn't about China. This is about Canada. This is about Europe. This is about our main trading partners. And this is about whether Americans should have the freedom to decide how to spend their own money. Should the government decide, well, no, you have to pay a 25% tax. That's all a tariff is a tax. So if you're making aluminum boats, if you're making air conditioners, if you're making cars, if you're making aircraft, this is a tax on you. It's going to get passed along to the American consumers. It's going to cost us billions.
What is there a national security implication at all in a world
under the Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This is a national security provision. And the reason why the tariffs are set at the levels that President Trump announced is so that these industries can become self-sustaining. So if we're in a war of any duration, we will be able to make steel, we will be able to make aluminum. And by the way, this is not just some theoretical concern, because at this point, the United States doesn't make certain types of steel and aluminum that go into our weapons. So although there are a lot of trade concerns that Brian's talking about, I can understand that, but this is a national security issue.
Guys, I think it was, 15 years ago, we had 18 of the top 25 steel makers in the world. Today, I looked at the list compiled in 2016, mind you, 2 years old now, but I believe we have 2 of the top 25. China has 10. China in 2000 produced about 11%, 15% of steel. Now they produce 46.8% of steel in the world. It's a communist country. They repress the people. They suppress human rights. They cheat. They steal. They take our intellectual property. They really try and will, I think, effort domination not only of their hemisphere but of our hemisphere. And I think back on the experts, Brian, and what they've said about China in the years past, the same people we're supposed to listen to today. Here's some of the headlines in the last month. Foreign Affairs, the China reckoning, how Beijing defied American expectations. I believe we have the free, there they are. Washington Post, we got China wrong. Now what? The Economist, how the West got China wrong. All the experts.
I think you're exactly right, Laura, but I don't think we want to be more like China as a result. You look around the world, the countries that are most prosperous are those that have the most economic freedom. We need more freedom, not less freedom. This is a backtrack on what President Trump has done to make us more competitive.
All right, guys, great segment. And by the way, after the worst-rated Oscars, I know Brian and Gordon were watching them last night with the popcorn. Celebrities might want to take a cue, and you come across a celebrity who really gets it. Country legend Dolly Parton discussed her hit song and film 9 to 5 on Nightline last week. And anchor David Wright could not resist trying to go Dolly into talking politics. Didn't go so well.
I'm not being political. I don't do politics. I'm not getting into any of that because I have a lot of fans out there and I don't want to offend anybody. And besides, I just don't get into that. And so if you are deciding you may want to ask me something more serious, don't, because I'm not going to answer it.
Fair warning. Okay.
I'm not going to.
I might still ask.
Well, you can ask, but I might still tell you where to put it. I mean, where you got it.
All right, Wright's having a good time, but he couldn't help himself. He tried to get her to compare President Trump, of course, to the sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot boss in 9 to 5. Dolly was having none of it.
We have a president of the United States who said those things on that bus.
I'm not addressing that. I do not get into that. Of course, I have my opinion about everybody and everything. But I learned a long time ago, keep your damn mouth shut if you want to stay in show business. I'm not in politics. I'm an entertainer.
And yet, you're also a role model.
Yes, I am. That's why I don't talk about people.
Dolly is the living embodiment of the shut up and sing dictum I have long preached since I wrote the book 15 years ago. That is how you maintain your celebrity with class and dignity, and you're much more unifying. Now, one hopes Dolly will be a role model, not only to our audience, but to her fellow celebrities. We'll be right back. Seconds ago, he will likely cooperate with a Mueller probe, this after going on TV all day long saying he was not going to appear before the grand jury. Well, I don't know what he had in his drink, but CNN, that performance was awesome. That's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream. Shannon, it's not even Friday and the dance party, and we're already talking about margaritas, gin and tonics, and giving interviews to CNN.
We are stone cold sober here on Fox News at night, so expect no shenanigans.
Have a great show.
Thank